The bustling city street was a scene of chaos. Cars honked impatiently, emergency sirens wailed in the distance, and people rushed past, their focus on finding safety. The air was thick with dust from a recent earthquake that had sent tremors through the neighborhood, leaving cracks in the pavement and shattered glass on the ground. Among the confusion, an older woman in an elegant outfit struggled to remain standing. Her designer handbag hung loosely from her arm as she leaned against a lamppost, visibly disoriented and clutching her side, where a small trickle of blood stained her blouse. Across the street, a young black boy named Jordan observed the scene. He was on his way home from running errands for his grandmother when the tremors began. His instinct to help had always been strong, instilled in him by a family that valued community and compassion. He noticed the woman's pale complexion and her uneven attempts to steady herself. The crowd moved around her, barely sparing a glance as she visibly weakened. Without hesitation, Jordan sprinted across the street, weaving through the panicked masses. His sneakers crunched over broken glass as he approached the woman. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked, his voice steady despite the chaos around them. She looked at him with glazed eyes, attempting to speak but unable to form coherent words. Realizing the urgency of the situation, Jordan carefully took her arm, supporting her weight. "I'll get you to help," he promised. The streets were treacherous, with debris blocking paths and cracks widening in the pavement. Jordan used his quick thinking and knowledge of the area to navigate toward the nearest hospital. The woman stumbled several times, but Jordan's firm grip and reassuring words kept her moving. Onlookers paused to watch, some snapping photos or recording videos of the boy's courageous act, but none offered assistance. When they finally reached the emergency entrance of the hospital, medical staff rushed out with a stretcher. As the woman was wheeled away, she grasped Jordan's hand weakly, murmuring words of gratitude. A nurse asked, "Are you family?" Jordan shook his head, explaining how he had found her. The staff's admiration was evident as they assured him she would receive the best care. Exhausted and covered in dust, Jordan sat on a bench outside the hospital, his thoughts racing. He didn't know who the woman was or why no one else had stopped to help, but he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. It wasn't about recognition, it was about doing the right thing. Little did he know, his actions had set the stage for a series of events that would forever alter his life. Unbeknownst to him, the woman he had saved was none other than Eleanor Grant, the beloved mother of a billionaire entrepreneur whose name was synonymous with success. News of the rescue spread quickly, carried by witnesses and the videos that began circulating online. The next day, Jordan's simple act of courage would bring him face to face with a man who could change his destiny in unimaginable ways. Jordan was a 15-year-old boy living in a modest neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. Despite the challenges surrounding him, he had earned a reputation for his compassion and resourcefulness. His neighbors often remarked on his willingness to lend a hand, whether it was helping an elderly resident carry groceries or tutoring younger kids struggling in school. Jordan's life was not easy. His single mother worked long hours to support the family, leaving him to shoulder many responsibilities. Yet he carried his burden with quiet resilience, fueled by dreams of a brighter future. Since he was a child, Jordan had envisioned himself as more than his circumstances. He often spent hours sketching ideas for small businesses in a battered notebook, from a neighborhood food delivery service to a landscaping company. His ambitions weren't just for personal gain. He wanted to create opportunities for others in his community, many of whom were trapped in a cycle of poverty. However, these dreams always seemed just out of reach. With limited resources, he often had to shelve his plans, focusing instead on the immediate needs of his family. On the other side of the city, Eleanor Grant was a woman of grace and humility. She was the mother of Richard Grant, one of the wealthiest and most influential businessmen in the region. Richard had built a vast corporate empire from scratch, earning both admiration and criticism. While he was celebrated for his success, many saw him as aloof and disconnected from the struggles of everyday people. Eleanor, however, was the opposite. Despite her son's wealth, she remained deeply committed to her values, often spending her time volunteering at local charities and advocating for underserved communities. That day, Eleanor had been visiting a shelter in Jordan's neighborhood, delivering supplies and speaking with families impacted by the economic downturn. It was not uncommon for her to immerse herself in such work, a stark contrast to her son's high-powered lifestyle. She believed in the power of kindness and small acts of generosity, something she had tried to instill in Richard, though with limited success. When the earthquake struck, Eleanor had been leaving the shelter, making her way toward her car parked a few blocks away. The tremors hit without warning, toppling streetlights and sending bricks tumbling from buildings. Amid the chaos, Eleanor was caught off guard, losing her balance and injuring her ankle. By the time she managed to steady herself, the streets were in disarray, and she found herself alone, unable to move swiftly through the debris. In her moment of vulnerability, Eleanor's thoughts turned to her son. Despite their differences, she cherished him deeply and worried about how he would cope if something happened to her. Little did she know, a stranger, Jordan, was about to step in and change both of their lives forever. Jordan's journey and Eleanor's plight converged in that single moment of crisis. While he had no idea who she was or the wealth she represented, Jordan's actions were driven purely by his sense of duty and empathy. Similarly, Eleanor's experience would remind her of the value of humanity and connection, something she felt her son had forgotten in his pursuit of success. As their paths intersected amid the rubble, neither could predict the profound impact they would have on each other's lives. For Jordan, it was a chance to rise above his circumstances and achieve his dreams. For Eleanor and her son, it was a reminder of the transformative power of kindness and the importance of staying grounded, no matter how high one's fortunes soared. The chaos of the earthquake was overwhelming. Streets were filled with debris, and the cries of distressed residents echoed through the air. Amid the destruction, Jordan spotted an elderly woman lying on the ground, her elegant clothing caked with dust and torn in places. Her ankle was twisted unnaturally, and she struggled to remain conscious, her breaths shallow and labored. She was Eleanor Grant, though Jordan had no idea who she was. To him, she was simply someone in need, and that was enough. Without a moment's hesitation, Jordan darted through the rubble-strewn streets and knelt beside her. "Ma'am, I'm here to help," he said, his voice steady, despite the adrenaline surging through him. She nodded faintly, unable to speak, but her eyes held a mix of relief and pain. Carefully, Jordan assessed her injuries. She needed medical attention immediately, and waiting for emergency services in the chaos wasn't an option. Bracing himself, Jordan gently lifted Eleanor into his arms. She wasn't heavy, but navigating the ruined streets while carrying her was no small task. Debris blocked the usual routes, and the tremors had left cracks and holes in the pavement. Jordan's feet slipped on loose gravel more than once, but he kept going, driven by a determination that overshadowed his physical exhaustion. As they made their way through the wreckage, Eleanor mustered enough strength to whisper, "Thank you. I don't know how to repay you." Jordan shook his head, his focus unwavering. "You don't have to, ma'am. Just hold on. We're almost there." Every step was a challenge. He dodged falling pieces of brick and ducked under sagging power lines, all while keeping Eleanor shielded from harm. Onlookers paused to watch the boy's incredible act of bravery, some offering directions or clearing paths as he passed. By the time he reached the hospital, his arms were trembling from the effort, but he refused to stop until he had ensured Eleanor's safety. Inside the hospital, nurses and doctors rushed to help as Jordan gently placed Eleanor on a stretcher. "She needs help right away," he told the staff, his voice urgent but calm. Eleanor grasped his hand weakly as they wheeled her away. "You're a remarkable young man," she said, her voice barely audible. Jordan gave her a reassuring smile before stepping back to let the medical team do their work. While Eleanor was treated, Jordan stayed in the waiting area, pacing nervously. Though he didn't know her, he felt a sense of responsibility for her well-being. A nurse approached him after a while, her face a mix of curiosity and admiration. "You carried her here through all that. You're a hero," she said. Jordan shrugged modestly. "I just did what anyone should do." As the doctors stabilized Eleanor, she insisted on knowing the name of her rescuer. The nurse returned to Jordan and asked for his details, but he hesitated. "It's not necessary," he said. "I just wanted to make sure she was okay." Despite his reluctance, the nurse pressed him, explaining that Eleanor's family would want to thank him. Unbeknownst to Jordan, the nurse contacted Eleanor's son, Richard Grant, a powerful and wealthy businessman. When Richard heard what had happened, he immediately left his office and rushed to the hospital. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. A teenager, a complete stranger, had risked his life to save his mother. By the time Richard arrived, Jordan had already slipped out, quietly leaving the hospital and heading back home. He didn't expect recognition or reward. He simply felt relief knowing Eleanor was safe. However, the staff provided Richard with enough information to track down the boy who had saved his mother's life. Inside the hospital room, Eleanor told Richard about the boy's courage, her voice filled with gratitude. "That young man didn't hesitate, Richard. He carried me through all that chaos. He's the reason I'm still here," she said. Richard sat in stunned silence, reflecting on the extraordinary act of kindness that had saved his mother. For the first time in years, he felt something shift within him, a realization that not all heroes wear suits or come from wealth. The boy's bravery and humility left an indelible mark on both Eleanor and Richard, setting the stage for a life-changing encounter. Richard Grant stood by his mother's bedside, his face etched with both relief and disbelief. Eleanor, though weak, recounted the story of her rescue, her voice filled with awe. "Richard, you should have seen him," she said, her eyes misty with emotion. "That boy carried me through the rubble like I weighed nothing. He didn't hesitate, not for a second." Richard, a man accustomed to analyzing data and managing empires, struggled to process the selfless act she described. "A teenager did all that?" he asked, his tone a mix of skepticism and curiosity. Eleanor nodded, her grip on his hand firm. "Yes. He didn't care about the danger, he only cared about helping me." As the hospital staff filled in the gaps, Richard learned that the boy had already left the hospital, refusing any recognition or reward. The nurse, who attended to Eleanor, described how the boy had stayed until she was stabilized, pacing the waiting room and ensuring she received proper care before quietly slipping away. When Richard pressed for details about the boy, the nurse hesitated, respecting the boy's humility. "He didn't want to be found, sir," she said. "But he mentioned his name, Jordan, and that he lives in a modest neighborhood nearby. That's all we know." Intrigued, Richard's initial skepticism gave way to admiration. He couldn't ignore the weight of his mother's words or the sheer bravery it took for a teenager to risk his life for a stranger. As he learned more about Jordan's background, that he came from a struggling family and likely had little to his name, Richard's perspective began to shift. This boy, with no resources or wealth, had displayed a level of courage and compassion that far exceeded anything money could buy. For years, Richard had built his empire by focusing solely on profit and efficiency, often overlooking the human side of his decisions. He realized he had become disconnected from the values his mother had always tried to instill in him: kindness, gratitude, and a sense of responsibility to others. Eleanor's words echoed in his mind. "He saved me, Richard, not because he had to, but because it was the right thing to do." The next morning, Richard made up his mind. He would find Jordan, not only to thank him, but to ensure his life was forever changed by the courage he had shown. Richard wasn't content with a simple thank you or monetary reward. He wanted to make a lasting impact, inspired by the boy's selflessness. When Richard returned to his office, he instructed his team to locate Jordan. "This isn't about charity," he told them. "This is about recognizing someone who exemplifies everything we should strive to be. Find him." As his staff worked to track down Jordan, Richard reflected on how the boy's actions had reignited something he hadn't felt in years: a desire to connect with people beyond business transactions and superficial relationships. Eleanor's survival and Jordan's bravery had become a turning point, forcing him to confront the values he had long neglected. By the end of the day, Richard had a plan. He wouldn't just thank Jordan. He would honor his courage by offering opportunities that could change his life. For Richard, this was no longer about repaying a debt. It was about acknowledging the power of humanity and ensuring it was nurtured and celebrated. With every step, he felt his own life beginning to shift, guided by the lessons of a boy whose bravery had humbled him. The following day, Richard arrived in Jordan's neighborhood in his sleek, black luxury car, drawing curious stares from neighbors and passers-by. The streets, lined with modest homes and bustling with the rhythms of daily life, quieted as his presence became the focus of attention. Richard stepped out of the car, his polished demeanor a stark contrast to the surroundings, but his expression carried warmth and purpose. Jordan, who had just returned from helping a neighbor with chores, froze as he recognized the man approaching him. Behind Richard, several other cars arrived, carrying members of his team and media representatives. Richard smiled and extended his hand to the boy. "Jordan," he began, "I'm Richard Grant. You saved my mother's life, and today I want to start repaying that debt." The boy's family gathered on the porch, wide-eyed and uncertain about what was happening. The neighbors, too, began to gather, curious and intrigued. Richard turned to address the growing crowd, his voice steady and full of conviction. "This young man," he said, gesturing toward Jordan, "did something extraordinary. While others hesitated, he stepped up and saved my mother, risking his own safety. Such courage and selflessness cannot go unrecognized." He paused, letting his words sink in. Then he announced, "Today, I want to make sure Jordan and his family never have to struggle again. First, I'm offering Jordan a full scholarship to any school or program he chooses, tailored to his dream of becoming a business owner. Education is the foundation of success, and I want him to have the tools to build a future as extraordinary as his heart." Gasps rippled through the crowd and Jordan's mother clutched her chest in disbelief, tears welling in her eyes. "Second," Richard continued, "I'm providing immediate financial assistance to Jordan's family. You've raised an incredible young man, and I want to ensure that you have the stability to continue nurturing his potential." The neighbors erupted in applause, and some wiped away tears. But Richard wasn't finished. "Finally," he said, turning back to Jordan, "I see a leader in you. That's why I'm establishing a mentorship program for you. You'll work directly with me, learning everything you need to know about running a business. And when the time comes, you'll take over as CEO of one of my company's new ventures." Jordan's jaw dropped, his humility shining through even in his astonishment. "Mr. Grant, I don't even know what to say," he stammered. Richard placed a hand on his shoulder. "Say you'll make the most of it, Jordan. Say you'll use these opportunities to chase your dreams and make a difference." The boy nodded firmly, his determination gleaming in his eyes. "I will," he said, "not just for me, but for my family and my community." As the crowd erupted into cheers and applause, Richard felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Jordan's courage had not only saved his mother's life, but also reignited his own sense of purpose. The boy's humility and determination reminded him of values he had long forgotten, and he knew this moment marked the start of a journey for both of them. As the days turned into weeks, Jordan embraced his newfound opportunities with determination and gratitude. Under Richard's mentorship, he immersed himself in the world of business, quickly grasping concepts that would have seemed unreachable only a short time ago. The boy's natural intelligence, paired with his work ethic and ability to think creatively, transformed him into a rising star within the company. Richard, once consumed by the fast-paced demands of wealth and power, found his own perspective shifting. Inspired by Jordan's humility and drive, he began to invest more time in initiatives that connected his company to the broader community. One of the first steps was establishing a foundation named after his mother, dedicated to improving opportunities for underprivileged youth. This endeavor became a personal mission, honoring both his mother's values and Jordan's extraordinary act of courage. Jordan's progress was a source of pride for everyone around him. He excelled in his education, balancing academics with hands-on experience in Richard's company. He became known for his innovative ideas, particularly those focused on creating sustainable and community-driven projects. His passion for giving back remained at the heart of every decision he made, ensuring that his work would benefit not just the company, but the people who needed it most. The small neighborhood where Jordan grew up began to transform as well. With the financial assistance provided by Richard, families saw improvements in housing, access to education, and local resources. The ripple effect of Jordan's bravery spread far beyond what anyone could have imagined, inspiring others in the community to believe in the power of resilience and kindness. Years later, a grand event was held in celebration of a milestone for Richard's company. The venue was packed with employees, business partners, and community leaders, all gathered to recognize the achievements of the company and its remarkable new CEO, Jordan. The young man, now in his 20s, stood confidently at the podium, his journey from the streets of his modest neighborhood to the helm of a major enterprise, a testament to his character. Richard and his mother sat in the front row, their faces glowing with pride. Jordan began his speech by reflecting on the pivotal moment that changed everything. "When I saw Mrs. Grant that day, I didn't think about anything except getting her to safety," he said. "I had no idea that act would lead me here. It's a reminder that every choice we make, every step we take, has the power to shape not just our lives, but the lives of those around us." He paused, scanning the crowd before continuing. "I'm here because someone believed in me, and because a community supported me. Now, it's my responsibility to do the same for others. Together, we can build a world where kindness and opportunity go hand in hand." The room erupted in applause, the sound resonating with a sense of shared hope and purpose. After his speech, Jordan joined Richard and his mother on stage, standing united as a symbol of what could be achieved when compassion met determination. As the evening drew to a close, Jordan reflected on how far he had come. The journey hadn't been easy, but it was proof that even the smallest acts of bravery could lead to unimaginable change. Standing beside the people who had become like family to him, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. Sometimes, he thought to himself, success finds you when you least expect it, through the lives you choose to save. With those words etched in his heart, Jordan looked out over the crowd, ready to embrace the future and all the possibilities it held.